I did that too.
Because you were here
Yeah, so this is kind of my second year in teaching here. I've been in IT for 8 years now. Previous to that, I was in the military. So I retired out of Luke. I got my first IT job in 2013. Then I was taking a course here, a Amazon, one of their foundational courses, and teacher approached me. Was like, "Hey, you ever think about teaching?" And it's something I thought about at times. So got signed up and been doing a couple semesters here teaching. So.
nice.
But this semester has been a difference because it's the first time we did the courses online. Didn't have enough enrollment for the on-campus course, so we started doing it online.
Spanning all this. After we wrap up tonight, I'm going to drive up to Prescott, spend the night, and go hiking.
Cool. How's the weather up there?
Which is
I know I went outside today. And I don't know accurately, but I was in a car. Looking at the temperature gauge, it's like 78 or 80 or something. That's better. Below 110.
usually after Thursday night class, if the weather's good, I'm just like,
Mm,
go meet up with some friends, do some hiking, come back.
cool.
Like Thursday night. It's a good way to wrap up one day.
I like that. Good plan.
It takes a few hours.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
Looking for us.
No problem.
I'll do a little introduction and then. Okay. Hi everybody. Hello. Okay, this is great. I like seeing all the good faces. Hi and hello to students that I have seen but not for a long time. So Kate is coming. She's a little lost on campus right now, so I just want to give her a chance to get here. And okay, so who's the other class that's here? So we've got an A plus class, and then what are you in, Alex? ITS, right? Okay, so what are you guys learning about right now?
Just did network hacking.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's very nice. And then, so do you see any overlap in what you're learning in this class as what maybe you learned in some of your Cisco?
Yeah, a lot of the network stuff that is overlapping, and I don't have to go into all the words.
Oh, yeah.
Networking stuff, because it's surprisingly detailed.
Okay, well, that comes in handy. And then the other class that we have in here is the BPC, is it 170 or 270? 270, okay, excellent. So today's topic is about converged security because there's so much happening right now that really when you are working in security or any type of IT field, you're not really gonna be siloed into one area. A lot of times you're gonna have to be collaborating and working with other groups. And we have to think about security more holistically. And I know that Rod told me he has been actually addressing that with his classes and students. So I think that this hopefully won't be the first time that you've heard about that. And then Kate is a security analyst. So she's not really in IT, but she has to work with and has to interact with IT. And again, think of things from that perspective, okay? So So again, I just wanna wait a couple more minutes and let her get here. And then, when you all, I should have been talking in the microphone. Oh my gosh, we're recording this. So when you talk, you have to talk in the microphone so that it doesn't broadcast out. But it does record. So everything I just said did record. Anyway, there we go. Yeah, okay.
That's Kate.
So, oh, good, so there's more people coming. Hi, Rochelle. Yeah, well, Kate's coming, she's a little lost, so I'm trying to wait and let her get here, so. And I sent Nikki to go look for her,
Okay.
so hopefully, there's a seat right up here. Yeah. Seat right there. We do have it wrong on the flyer.
That's okay, it doesn't matter. It's not the first time.
Yeah.
It's usually the last name. That's what surprised me.
Oh. So, and I'm gonna have you introduce yourselves so that you can show.
Okay, cool.
There's a seat right up here.
Okay. That's no fun.
There's a seat right here. Hi, Kate, come in. It's okay, it's okay. Remember, I said casual and laid back, so.
Sorry, so sorry.
It's okay. You're like 2 minutes late. It's no big deal. Okay, all right. So we're gonna get started. Again, I'm just gonna have each of you introduce yourselves and a little bit about like what your background is. Okay, and again, then we'll just kind of open up the conversation. I have a couple of questions to start with. And then hopefully you thought of some questions, and then just from the conversation, it'll generate some topics. And then, again, remember, you have to pass this, right? So, or was it easier to do this one?
Doesn't matter.
Okay,
I'm comfortable with it.
okay. All right, so go ahead, Greg. Start.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Davis. I'm an instructor here. I teach the CNT 205, the security course. Many of you I've seen kind of through some of the seminars we've had, students from the past. Good to see you there. But anyway, I'm Greg Davis. I started in IT in 2013. Prior to that, I was in the military. So my background primarily right now is working in a network operations center. We work with security from across the world. There's different platforms that we have here in the continental USA and other things. So I work for the Department of Homeland Security. So that's why you hear me talk about a lot of that. So right now, my primary project is working with wireless, but from the topic here, we're always talking about security, from the physical security, from locking that down, especially for government access. So one thing I did kind of incorporate into my course when I started kind of my second semester was about the whole holistic type of security. We're not just talking about port security and locking down a physical device, but we're also talking about physical security, the Internet of Things now that we'll be talking about. So that's a little bit about me, and I hope to have a good time with you tonight. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rod Fitzhugh. I'm a teacher here, and I teach ITS 240 and ITS 110. Retrospectively, that's Ethical Hacking and Information Security Fundamentals. I'm a former operations director with GoDaddy.com, and just to give you some context around that, I was with the company when it, was just really starting to get going in 2003. It was a small company in Arizona. We had probably about 50 people in one office in Arizona, and I stayed there almost 20 years. I retired in 2020, and we took it from such a small operation. By the time we left, we had 10,000 employees in offices all across the world. We went from having just a million customers to 22 million customers and about 80 million domains under management. So it was a fun ride. It was exponentially big, and we merged and acquired about 30 different companies in that time. So there was a lot of different things that we did. Now, prior to that, I had my own small IT company here in Phoenix, and I've done a variety of other things as well. To piggyback off what Greg said, when you scale a company like that and it gets really, really large, you have to start thinking about integrated solutions like Converged security, because as you expand and you get more and more locations, the threats don't go away, they simply increase. And the more market share footprint that you get, the more physical location you get, everything gets bigger, so it helps to put it together and have a holistic view. And so that's just kind of the basic intro. So I'll go ahead and pass it on.
So much. Hello, can you hear me?
It doesn't, it's just
All right.
recording.
All right. Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I'm deeply apologize for being late. My name is Kate Repchi. I am Ukrainian South African. I'm a new friend of Andrea. And today I'm invited to talk about the holistic security approach, which, from my point of view, I'm a political security and risk analyst. And this is some of it is my area of specialization, and I'm really looking forward to shed more light on the security analysis from the point of view of political science. Thank you.
Like with that, maybe we could start out, when we think about these different areas of security, a cybersecurity, IT security, and then also security from a geopolitical view, in what ways can departments or areas of security work together? Like, what are some of the ways that you foresee, especially with the changes of technology, right? So how is the changes of technology demanding that we have more cohesiveness when it comes to security across many different platforms?
That's a really good question. And if we're talking about converged security, we're not just talking physical security and cybersecurity. When it gets holistic, you can look at it as it could involve marketing teams, it can involve customer service teams, it can involve legal teams. And every operation, whether it's very large or very small, is taking in data, and that data can be aggregated and shared. You'll find that most large service providers already have some kind of a relation with a government entity. I can tell you from working, in the industry that if there's a law enforcement concern, it's pretty routine for the FBI or someone to show up at a data center, take possession of a server. So there's a lot of information that already gets shared. But when you converge things together, again, you have to be very careful about scaling, because you can generate a lot of false positives really quick. And I don't know if anyone else has any experience with that. Or any insights they would like to share.
Well, as I introduced myself, I was telling you I work with the Department of Homeland Security. And, definitely from a government scale, we are across many countries. Also, I teach the Amazon Foundations class, which in there, Amazon is everywhere too. And as it was talking about scaling, you have to go with governmental rules and different things. So we just can't put our data in different places and not have the government or those laws that are playing or that are come into play with that. So as you go into these companies, you're going to be introduced to a lot of different platforms with different policies, because as we know, data it's like gold. We know about the ethical hacking, we know about the security protocols. So what I was learning when I first got into working with the Department of Homeland Security was just not so much the physical security, but the different protocols we have. We're different agents. We're also different with different assets and personnel that we're moving. So when you walk into your first job or any job that you have, you're going to learn these different things. You're going to have different administrations or different department heads or leaders. And this is the things that they discuss at the table. They're talking about how do we just not this data, but are there geopolitical rules that we have to abide by? When you're in another, what are their rules about passing data? So definitely in my course, not just when I teach CNT 205, I try to introduce that, because you can get so focused on how do we do the things from day to day from the vendor's perspective, but we forget about there's a lot of things out there like one thing that was introduced into some of the personnel that I work with, body cameras. What does that mean? There's privacy acts. There's different things that we can do with that. So we have to make sure that we are just kind of expanding, because as you move in your your situations, you're going to come across different things. You're going to have to learn about that.
Thank you. Oh, there's so much has been spoken about from a deeply professional field here. I'm just going to add up my 5 cents, perhaps. Of course, I agree with the fellow colleagues here that we live in the age when the security of data and the information we gather is extremely porous and susceptible to security, to potential attacks, hacker attacks, cyber warfare. Cyber terrorism. And we have to approach this all-encompassing, holistic approach. We have to look deeply, not just like in terms of, for example, meteorology, hurricanes. We just not simply look at the right why the trees have fallen or the destruction in aftermath. We have to look where does the hurricane come from, what's the speed, and different other aspects. So I'll just give one of the examples. I've been recently finished my contract in the United Nations in Ukraine, in the war zone, and I cannot give all the details, obviously due to sensitivity of information. I've been doing research and collecting the information about the entire organization. That task was given to me by the senior management of the United Nations office in Ukraine. And I identified potential risks. For example, there was one of the risks could be as well, there were more data gathered than data was used, which opens a particular set of data to potential vulnerabilities and being exploited by malicious actors. If it is, because the system itself of what I have identified is highly porous, and after finalizing the research, the senior management has been notified a few months perhaps, and I have been, kind of tooting around it and saying, guys, you have to really look into the vulnerability of the data because there are plenty of the political actors that might use it for malicious purposes. A few months after I left Ukraine, departed Ukraine, there was a hacker attack on the United Nations office in Copenhagen. So that it could be one of the examples how vulnerable we are and how it is important to look at the geopolitical context. Where is it coming from whom the influence is, who is involved, in order to be more innovative and more efficient in not just curing the disease, but actually apply preemptive measures. Thank you.
All the time, but what about like new bots of AI language models that are astroturfing like everywhere to try to skew information or data, or did you handle any of that?
Thank you. That's an interesting question, and perhaps let me approach it from this angle. You mentioned very tech-savvy things related to the IT. I'm not in the particular field because I'm more into intelligence analysis and geopolitical security risks. But perhaps I could tackle it from the point of what I generally identified in Ukraine. There is a huge issue with the information systems, for example, messengers as well. In a particular environment when the country is at war, what would have been really important at this particular moment to develop perhaps their own messenger, which I haven't seen being developed. What they're using instead is Telegram. And Telegram is highly porous, and first of all, I don't know, perhaps you would be more able to explain about those things. My knowledge so far as I understand, of course, Telegram is highly influenced by Russia, and it poses massive risks in terms of military communication, defense communication, because all the things, and I have been personally sitting under missile attacks in Kyiv. And every time the missile attacks happens, you get those pin messages on Telegram. It was really strange to me, particularly to witness, because I think the most important thing would have been from the beginning of this large-scale invasion is to invent their own messenger. But there are reasons, perhaps, why it hasn't been done so far. But thank you. That's an important issue you're raising, and yeah, it's still somewhere in the air to be answered. Thank you.
And that different areas of security can work together better. Or do you have ideas on that? So like the messenger creating their own app, right, their own way of communicating. Are there other things that you see that we need to be focusing on? And is it related to AI and how we might need to manage that, or, I don't know, put standards on that?
That's a really good question. And, as far as new ways of communicating, I think it makes a good point when you talk about basically covert channels of communication. Like if someone's using something like Telegram, you don't know how bad actors are going to communicate. Bad actors may choose to fly under the radar, and they may communicate through a video game channel. For instance, they may go into a video game room or a Discord chat that just seemingly almost sounds like something out of a spy movie. But if they can stay hidden and out of the light, that's the idea, right? It's almost like having an advanced persistent threat. Someone that just stays hidden, isn't involved. So when we involve AI, AI is very, number one thing I'll say about AI is it's very error prone. A lot of people think that AI is, almost faultless and it's just going to give good information. Well, it gives a lot of incorrect information. So disinformation can be just as dangerous as good information or sensitive information. So that's one thing I would add, is to be very careful, again, about inputs versus outputs.
From the Network Operations Center perspective, we work with a security operations center called SOC. And so they're kind of like our front end that tell us if there's threats or different things that are going on. They're definitely, we'll learn from the technical piece of, we're worried about so much of the actual threat back into something or some trying to break something. But as I hear my colleagues up here talk about it, it's really, you can get so buried in the weeds. And as Andrea is saying, it's like, how do we to know the new footprint as and to be used? We're using it in some of our Cisco equipment. So now we've got data that's going to be going across the network, and it's going to be going across to to the vendors and pulling this information in, and it's pulling all data. We've got personal data that's going across the internet. So the one thing that I would say is that as this goes from my own opinion, as I started out in IT, I think it was very basic. We talked about ACLs, we talked about access controllers, we talked about the very basic of things. But now, as information is kind of expanded across, we have to look at all kind of things. Everything's a potential avenue in, and so work with other colleagues. I think you need to kind of put in front of you some things that you're going to try to not just kind of be in this. What I try to do also with myself is working with SOC, the Security Operations Center. We have collaborating with those teams, come to know them, things that they use for tools that are going to help you, and it's going to get into a lot of the things that you hear us talk about. But specifically to your question about those specific footprints, I haven't personally experienced or come across something like that. But as I see and hear different things that are in the news, and we talk about misinformation, it could come from any point. The definite things that we're going to have there with the things that are going to be in place, like procedures and policies, different things that you're going to protect. Your encrypted devices. I have an encrypted device, so I need to make sure that I protect that data, because someone who wants to get it is going to use it for misinformation or do whatever they need to, or put something in it and I would never know about it. So some of your basic things that you're going to do day to day that protect when you're in an organization to protect that data. You're also going to look at collaboration that we've kind of talked about a lot, and just kind of the geopolitical world that we deal in. Nothing is safe. Everything's a potential operative thing to be used against you and your corporation. So your question is the pitfalls between within the organizations?
IT, cybersecurity, what are some common pitfalls when people try to communicate with people who are not exactly in their field? For example, maybe they use words or phrases that don't understand outside that certain field.
Well, I think like maybe there's some gaps, like what kind of gaps do you each maybe face when it comes to dealing with other areas?
All right. Personally, I know in the organization that I'm in, when there is such a threat that they don't have the scope of where this IP is coming from, the internet, the address. And so they'll like, I've talked with individuals in other organizations, whether they're dealing with security or with administrations, like, well, let's just give it to the network guys. They know what to do. We don't understand that, or vice versa. I don't understand servers, or I don't know what to do with that. That's definitely where you kind of need to the barriers that are broken is, it's just going to have to kind of go into it and do it and talk that with their language. You're going to run into sometimes stone walls that sometimes people just get closed-minded, but there's a new generation, and this is what is going to be different. If you're going to make that change and you're going to be a part of that catalyst, then we kind of have to learn what other organizations there speak, what they're talking about. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's going to open the doors for that too. But what is set in place by an organization and where I work, we've had where someone would come up and kind of sit in the organization where we sat and kind of look at the board that we're looking at when we've got failures or different things that are going on. And now they kind of see when we get notified of that, that outage, what we do, how we escalate, how we get that up the board and figure out to make out the calls to the technicians that's on the field. So the more that you can kind of get aware, if you're in an organization, and seek out that opportunity, hey, is there's an organization that you want to kind of know more about, ask the questions, kind of move in it. So being personable and going across that line is going to kind of help you understand what the other teams do administratively and technically.
Yeah, that is a really great question, and I like how you said it, learning to speak someone else's language, because not everyone knows the cyber language. And so when we're talking converged security, if we're talking putting different aspects of an organization or a department together that haven't traditionally operated in this model, what we're talking about is an actual cultural shift. And even though you're not going to remember necessarily, if you go in as a cyber expert and you're explaining all this, you have to walk away from it knowing not everything that you said is going to be remembered, but you tried to make the basics, just draw a baseline of what everyone needs to know, because it adds an extra layer of complexity into everybody's day. At the end of the day, as the colleague said, there's going to be a level of resistance in some spots, and there's going to be people who accept it. And as you scale it out, not only do you have to bring a common language, a common understanding, and understand the complexities, again, you have to realize that just like any other process, when you have more inputs, then you have more outputs. So you have to be very careful on that side as well. If you are on the side where you're analyzing, if you're an analyst and you're taking a look at threat reporting or threat analysis, and you say, okay, now all of a sudden we've done this converged security, we've included one or two different teams, we're kind of growing, we have physical now, because physical, in the past, people think of physical security as, guns, guards, and gates, right? That's what people think of as physical security, and maybe cameras, and then network, and people would think of it more as cyber, but it becomes put together and larger. Then people think, oh, social media, they're going out talking on X or Instagram or something like that, but everybody has vision, and because everybody has vision and interaction, you just never know what you're going to interact with, and then that information is valuable. If you see something, it goes back to, if you see something, say something. And when you have that extra input, you have to have, it's just like a firewall or an IDS or an IPS, right? You have to filter out what's noise versus what has value. So it's really about getting it going, learning from it, and scaling it slowly. Because if you scale it too quickly, what you'll have is you'll have all your analysts just flooded out by too many inputs.
Do you have anything to add? Yeah, just perhaps 5%. Absolutely, I absolutely agree with everything what was said previously, and particularly, from my side as a security specialist in geopolitical risk analysis, I'm passionate about security, and I think it's a fantastic field, but we need to meet each other, the IT people and the political science people. We need to work together, actually. There should be a culture of fostering collaboration and harmonious co-working, because we cannot exist without each other. Some things that security specialists in IT field pick up in microscopic vision, and things that they dissect, and deal with, they will need to also, collaborate. And so are the folks from the political science. They need to bring this kind of geopolitical, geostrategic vision down as well. And we need to, work harmoniously to really fix the illnesses of this world, which we are about to witness more and more, with every day. And it's a whole new storm coming our way, and buckle up. Yeah. So, and particularly, I want to give perhaps a few practical examples. As you previously mentioned, some resistance is met. Yeah, absolutely. For example, in United Nations office, I've met resistance from the fellow colleagues, because I'm in a little bit of a younger generation than some of my previous colleagues, and I do understand that without the IT security, the organization can just not manage. We have to update programs, we have to secure everything, the information that we are dealing with, gathering. And some majority of the colleagues in the office did not want to upload the new new applications or new, or reinstall their computers, and because some people just, are stubborn and they don't feel the need for that, they don't feel like this is something that is highly important. So resistances definitely need to be tackled here by popularizing and making people more interested. And so is the IT field, making more interested in the geopolitics as well. I'm not, encouraging you to, every day read the news, make yourself, if you're not entirely interested in politics, but subtly, now and then, on some topics that might interest you, educate yourself. Yeah, just do the reading, and I'm sure you do that already. Yeah, thank you.
You really have to think about how IT, in a lot of ways, has made our world really small, but really big, right? Brought us together with friends and foe that we may not have so many years ago. But IT, it just gives us such great, such a great ability to communicate, reach out, and access to information and everything like that. So that's why, again, like maybe 30 years ago, there wouldn't have been a conversation about holistic security. It's like, hey, you take care of your gates, and I'll take care of my, whatever, my network and
Right.
my default gateway. Stay off my default gateway. That type of a thing. So I think if you were to, and I think that was a good advice. So from everyone, like, what is something that maybe we can do personally, right? And then as a student, what other areas do we, right, are there any blind spots for learning that we might need to tackle, like as a student? Should there be something we should be looking at, expanding what we're learning, what we know, something like that?
Would you like to go first?
I think, if you're in IT, I want to believe that you're making the choice because you want to learn. It's never going to stop. From applications to protocols to procedures to how to interacting. And as we were talking about this, I started to think about DevOps. If Dev operations. Basically, there was a time when IT and the application part was just totally separate. They didn't talk. They were in their silos. They did this or that. But then, as we have seen, you hear that coin phrase DevOps, Dev operations come up. And so now those groups are together. They're collaborating. It's probably also depicted out through a organization, and you can see that. Coming back to IT is, I think the blind spot, if you kind of get into this, is like, I'm just going to be cybersecurity, or I'm just going to be security, or I'm just going to kind of go down application. You can become a blind spot that you're not looking at the overall picture, and you can become siloed, and you can become very vulnerable in that situation. So what I have learned is, I guess on a personal level, is push myself beyond the barrier of just trying to become the expert in what I do. What I do right now, I do wireless. And so I push myself to kind of do more to understand how this is about certificates, how this works. And so I think, as a student, as you are moving forth, definitely in the short term, that comes to mind is there's kind of this thing that cybersecurity and security are two different paths. I think they are unison and they work together. I think you should expand. One purpose in the class is I was trying to introduce that into my course, was learning about adversarial tactics and techniques, the MITRE framework. It tells you how this is moved through out organization, how and things that have been worked out that governments and organizations are all coming together to say, this is what we do, and this is how we protect each other, and how we figure out what has happened to pass that information on to other organizations how to protect. So in that nugget of information that I was passing to my students, I wanted them to understand is like, we cannot just be in a silo and think that was a blind spot. And so I had this idea is like, if we can introduce it, you're not going to know it all. I mean, in one swoop, it's a big piece of information, as we were talking about. But if you have the opportunity, push yourself beyond something, even ask those questions in your organizations, that how are things that, you know, from administrative, what are we doing? What is that platform that we're trying to do? Because on the bottom end of we are the worker bees, so to speak, and we're turning the wheels and we're making things happen. Above us, somebody's making organizational decisions like, how do we protect and what's in the future that's coming on? So if you kind of look out there, there's a lot of things out there from different organizations that they're presenting. So I guess my stomp here is just like, look for something, ask the questions, push yourself, don't just get siloed. And I think that's one thing definitely in the career right now and in students, you'll kind of get elevated and hone your careers and skills.
That's excellent. And speaking of MITRE, you know, in ITS 240, you learn about tactics, techniques, and procedures, and it's really, MITRE's a great place for having a common language. So you go look at a tactic ID, and you can have a lot of different people from across different industries. You can give someone an ID for a tactic. Everybody can go look at it. Everyone is literally on the same page, right? At that point, we're on the same page. We have a common language. We have a common understanding of what we're looking at. And with DevSecOps, like everyone in this everyone in this room, I would be surprised if you did not have a cell phone in your pocket or in your backpack. And you think about security convergence and how it all comes together. Every one of those apps on your phone, unless you downloaded it from an untrusted source, it went through a vetting process, right? It went through a vetting process where the developer also worked with a cybersecurity team to make sure that it's safe. So there's a whole process on the back end, and you think about how much just your cell phone does. So what was originally siloed, if you think about banking, well, if 100 years ago, you would actually have to go to a bank, you'd have to ride a horse, go to a bank, right? And then you would have to conduct, you know, perhaps trade physical metal for something and, you know, get currency. Now everything's done digitally. Your bank is on your phone. Your school can be on your phone. Your connection to your family is on your phone. The pictures you share and store are on your phone. So just your phone is a great thought of convergence. It's all right there. Even your ID, you can have your ID on there, you can have your insurance card, everything that you need, but a lot of planning and scaling went into making that happen. It wasn't just one person's idea. It was a collective that came together and really had a shared vision and made it happen. Now, of course, it goes out and there's Android and Apple and everything else, but it's all the same general idea. It's people working together across multiple sectors of technology to produce the safest possible end user product.
For your examples as well, to add up, absolutely right topics were raised regarding the making or strategic organizational decisions. If I may provide one practical example without mentioning names or countries. For example, things like this happen sometimes. Let's say a person decided to rent a property. And then there is a property firm, and then there is a firm dealing the IT sector, guys who are dealing with the technical things, the security of information, validation checks, right, for property rental. And potentially during the chat or conversation with this third party involved in validation checks for property rental, for example, you see that this party is potentially located in the region, one of the regions in the world which is affected by the financial fraud activities. And at first you might, think, okay, but this is a trusted third party involved in this validation check. But then you might encounter a couple of problems. Then they ask you, for example, for the details of your banking account, online banking, for your login and password to check your banking, which I don't know about the legislation in the United States. In some countries, it's not entirely acceptable or not acceptable at all. And then, for example, when you decide not to give them the access to that information, direct access to the information in your online banking system, you notice during the chat that they are from one of those regions affected by the financial banking fraud. And after a little while, you notice that the link that has been sent to your email address has disappeared. And once you started asking them more deeper questions, they completely just disappear from the chat, and you are unable to rent property because you didn't undergo that validation check. So, in comparison to that, for example, you contact your colleague, and your colleague from the IT firm states the following, that they regularly hire folks from that region affected by the banking fraud activity, which is known in my field, but perhaps not entirely known in the IT field. And it comes as a surprise because that person in another IT company usually selects people from that region or a country. Which I'm not saying it's wrong. Definitely there is a certain amount of people from that particular country are have high expertise in dealing with such fraud because it is affected by fraud. But you have to be very careful when you take this such kind of strategic organizational decisions when selecting third party involved in validation checks or any vendors for your company. Another practical example could be just to show how it is important for us to work together as well. For example, ships, vessels, right? Large ships today, maritime security, this is one of the hot topics in geopolitical risk analysis. And they have an advanced navigation systems today, right? And there is a potential risk of these systems to be, affected or threatened by the cyber attack via navigation systems because they have an advanced GPS navigation systems. One of those examples may be remotely a few years back, if we remember, there was a ship that stuck in Suez Channel, so that could be one of those perhaps practical examples, but we wouldn't know for sure at the moment. So, yes, that is why we need to work together, because we need to know where is it coming from, to be aware, to make right organizational strategic decisions, selection of partners for the companies, and generally to create efficient, sustainable solutions for our global communities. Thank you.
Cyber attacks, they happen literally all seconds of the day across the whole world, but are cyber attacks increasing in severity to where maybe someday, is there a line that no country crosses where there's a physical retaliation? Because I know most of the just general public we don't hear about, what's happening behind the scenes cyber attack wise, so.
Let me just reword it. So you're asking, are there any cyber attacks that are so severe that on one country that country may retaliate in a physical way?
Yeah, are they increasing up to that point? So
yeah, could it get to that? Because at this point we haven't seen anything like that we know of, right? So I think that's an interesting question.
So, in the perspective that I have about it and the knowledge there, I would say, coming back from a military background, yes. We also know, I know in the Air Force, which I was in, they came up with a cyber security organization, became a department of the Air Force. So that right there tells all that this is a threat. It is now, I'm sure, always an awareness of what was going on and the abilities to use it and can it be used. We're all got different things like we were talking about cell phones, computers, chips in our planes, chips in whatever, as a colleague was saying in maritime situations, yes. Has there been an increase? I cannot say that I know there is an increase, but do I have a concern about it? Yes, I do. Not a concern of fear, but a concern of that is definitely in this job at some purpose. Every organization you work for is going to have some type of mission statement. That mission statement is going to overlap into have some type of effect if it's especially a global entity. As I was saying earlier, like Amazon, you've got different places that you can and cannot put certain data centers and different things like that. But to your point, as we become advanced, we are advancing with AI and different things. I think cybersecurity or the attacks are there. What we know about them is probably not going to be reported. But definitely, as you are in organizations and vetted, different when you get a security clearance, depending on that detail of where you worked, like the NSA, or sure, I'm pretty sure you would come to know that if you have aspirations to do that and work in the government. But I think we can all agree that just looking on the notices that we do have and the hacks that have happened in different businesses and different things, that cybersecurity is definitely an option to be used for criminal activity or geopolitical options too.
Yeah, that's not a question I can speak to from a government or military angle, but yeah, I think every organization, corporately, privately held entities, publicly traded entities outside of the government, they always have a threshold when they're going to take certain actions, and so there's always a risk tolerance. It's built into every threat, whether it's known or unknown, something like a 0 day, something that just happens, out of the wild, out of the blue. But there's always that risk level that's absolutely built into everything, whether it's fraud detection, whether you're going to determine if something is fraudulent. We've talked a little bit about sharing data across international lines, and I know in my classes, we go into GDPR and the various regulations that protect data. So you have to be very careful when it comes to data breaches and things of this nature, because again, there's always going to be that risk tolerance level. Again, I don't know anything about from the military or government aspect of the question, so I'll pass it over to Kate, but just from the corporate side, I would share it from that. Do you have a question?
I have a question. Is it related to this part? So like, it kind of goes hand in hand. And will that provide more jobs for us in the IT world too? Because it's digital and it's in a blockchain.
That's a great question. Personally, I'll share that I think crypto is very cool. Like, it's everywhere. It's being used. Money is already digitized. Like, I could PayPal anybody or send anyone in this room money digitally. It's already there. So when you think about blockchain has a lot of wonderful security applications to it. How is it going to change the world transactionally? Well, you've noticed that if you trade crypto, that Coinbase and Kraken and a lot of the other providers have recently, I believe the date is this month, where you have to go through the final ID vetting. I can't remember the name of it. I know I did it with Coinbase to establish your identity. That way transactions can be tracked a lot more, so that cuts down on a lot of the illicit activity. But I think it has a huge future. Now, as far as what's going to win out in the long run, whether it's going to be Bitcoin or Doge or XRP or whatever it might be, I absolutely don't know. I will tell you, having traveled the country and ask people and ask small businesses, you find that a lot of small businesses aren't adopting it yet. Now, a lot of larger businesses are. And part of that is people just simply, from an adoption standpoint, they don't understand the exchange of it. It's one thing to understand U.S. dollars to pesos. It's another thing to understand Bitcoin, where whether it's worth $72,000 a Bitcoin to one USD, because it comes a very, very small decimal. So there has to be ease of use. But when we talk about the cyber part of this, there's digital wallets and there's physical wallets. So when we go back to converged security, if you're trading crypto, you may have a wallet on your phone, you may have a wallet on your exchange, or you may also have a wallet that you keep at home, maybe on a USB stick. And so all of this comes together, and it all has to be thought of holistically in the sense of how am I going to protect this asset, because it's an asset class. I hope that makes sense.
Very good questions are asked here. I just want to maybe add some of my points. Cryptocurrency, interesting topic. But I always, cryptocurrency, I'm mesmerized with it. It's an interesting technology, we're experiencing new things, and they're rapidly developing, and globalization is not over. We live at the times where, on an example of Ukraine, I'll just step back into that topic. We live at the time when there is an increased development. At the same time, horrible and medieval things can happen too, which bring us backward. For example, just of January, I think it was around January or December this year, in Ukraine, Russians committed hacker attack. So the majority of the banking system was just out. The banking system, probably many other entities. And, the first rule of UN in security situations like this, keep a cash with you. Because when everything is out, there is nothing you can do. No crypto, no Doge, no Watch, no whatever. Nothing's gonna happen, If it's out, you can't mine anything, you can't do anything. So I think at the same time we have to be excited and move forward, but at the same time we have to be mindful that really sinister and horrible thing can happen and they can take place. I can also escalate probably in seconds. We have to be very wary of this and be prepared, and this is why we, once again and again, we have to work together to be prepared for such outbreaks. Thank you.
Everything is being digitized, right? I mean, it makes sense and it seems obvious that banking would be digitized, but again, if you think about your refrigerator might be digitized, right? Hospitals are digitized, so kind of back to your question about like a threat, our dams that hold back water, there's probably some network that's behind that. So there's a lot of things that if it doesn't, if it gets hacked, nuclear power plants, data centers, okay? I really want people to start thinking about data centers more as a utility and not really as something that's providing, again, a YouTube video, right? Because if something happens to a data center, we're potentially gonna lose access to a lot of different things. So I just think, again, that's why we need so many people being trained in these fields, because everything is gonna need to be protected. Like, it's not gonna, ruin my life if my, freezer dies because somebody's hacked into it. But that's just like a small example that would affect me personally, let alone when I began to expand that, think about the school, think about hospitals, medical facilities, military bases, et cetera. So, that's again why this whole idea of converged security is so important, because of the way the world is moving just technologically.
Just going back to that topic about cryptocurrency, I just want to know into the cyber aspect, how is cryptocurrency helping hackers or attackers complete transactions? And then I want to include everybody with the one question also. know, because states are allowing cryptocurrencies as a currency also. And
Politicians are accepting donations in cryptocurrency.
yeah, so just topics like that open up a lot of concern. And I just want to know why people they know that what currencies are being used for. For example, for as cybersecurity, they're doing. I don't want to get into that topic, but money laundering and all that. They know that they're doing that, but they still allow it. I want to know you guys' thoughts on
You know, with every invention, there always comes something that is a negative part of it. And I like how our colleague would say, you know, we can take 5 steps back, taking 1 step forward. So again, I want to attack it from, I don't know personally how this is going to be managed, but from a perspective, I would say that this is why our jobs are kind of on the rise right now. We're going to be in those positions. You're going to be introduced. You're going to come in as an entry level person. You're going to, whatever your aspirations are, the more you are well rounded to understand where we're going with stuff. As we said, you know, currency went from coins, now it's going to digitized coins. Different things that we have now that our grid system, our power systems, our medical systems, all these things are now becoming integrated. And trust me, you know, there are experts and many higher up science thinkers that are thinking about this. We're not alone. And in this group, we think and we're kind of on this part that we know. So to the point, I'm sure that there's probably think tanks and processes are going on. But I don't know if your question is alluding to, do we stop it? I don't think that's the answer. I think we learn how to deal with it. We're going to learn how to adapt. We're going to learn how to fix those problems, and it gets better. I mean, coins and dollars weren't the things that were traded in the beginning until it became a system that got fine-tuned as it moved on. So here in the cyber or in the IT world, I think we're kind of we're going to be rushed into that because we're studying it. We're understanding it. We can read the papers. We can read the things that are going on. We understand what the good and the bad that is not happening. And definitely when we have those that are in the right state of mind, I believe, that are organizing this, you know, there's always going to be something negative about it. There's always going to be somebody out there that takes what was for good and learn how to use it against you. But as we are smarter and understand the system, hopefully, you know, that side is more prevailing than the negative part of it.
That was a great question, Aryan. And you know, you mentioned you know, money laundering. I don't know if you were thinking about NFTs at that time, but I don't know. Has anyone in here purchased an NFT? Just out of curiosity, did anyone ever think that some of the prices they were going for were like a little high? Yeah.
Is that because it was laundering?
Perhaps, I don't know, or I can't speak to every transaction, but you know, it makes you wonder if, you know, if it's an NFT of a monkey, right, a digital monkey, and it goes for $5 million, is it really worth $5 million? So, you know, to your question, it's why does some of this allowed to be go on? So maybe there's a risk tolerance level, and I can't speak for law enforcement organizations, obviously, or government organizations, but maybe there's some value in allowing to understand the mechanism, allowing to understand the trajectory of it's going from here to here. If they can watch that on the blockchain, right? Blockchain's supposed to be private, but there's addresses involved. So maybe there's some value in allowing certain bad actors to continue with very low harm activities. To say, am I following your logic? Okay, cool. So that's kind of what would be my take on it. Another thing I wanted to touch on too that we talked about like how infrastructure, you know, relies on technology and cyber. And I've made the joke in class, like you could have a lot of IoT toasters, right? And you could have the toaster army because everyone hacks, you know, 1,000 toasters in Phoenix, and you have this toaster army bot, and now this toaster army bot's going to go out and, you know, do something terrible like a distributed denial of service attack. But everything in this room, like our lights are powered right now, right? Operational technology, IoT, the water that comes in, our restrooms, like everything's working together. So we can't remain siloed. We all have to have these conversations. We have to talk, whether it's crypto, whether it's cameras, whether it's data streams. We all have an opportunity to learn from each other. And the more that we can come together and the more that we can learn and share safely across obvious, geopolitical policies and things like this for the common good, the better world we're going to create. And it's these kind of conversations that really are the spark for that, because you will be the people who create the next level of the better world that we're in.
Just, yes. Did you want to add something? No, it's a very interesting question, yeah, about cryptocurrency. One of the potential reasons, perhaps, it of course allows to evade borders, right? We are like completely borderless, just shifting coins from one corner of the world to another. And potential risks as well they can be used on the dark web for the malicious actors like terrorist organization, cartels, narco trafficking, arms trafficking. That is a very important topic, and I think, yes, it's up to you, to the next generations of IT savvy and politically, hopefully, savvy people to resolve these problems. And again and again and again, that's why we need to understand each other. We need to more and more speak the same language, to converse with each other, to coexist harmoniously, and to build safe and secure communities around the world. Safety is the priority. If you don't have safety, you don't have anything. You don't have the thriving and developing world. So, yeah, thank you.
About this, right? So I think that's what they've been able to ride under the radar for a long time because it's not obvious, and so I think it's going to take a while.
That's kind of what I was going to ask is, like, I know there's nothing we can do immediately, but it always seems like the bad actors, they always adopt these technologies ground level whenever they arrive, and then use them and use them and use them and become experts in them. And then a lot of our, politicians and stuff, I want to say they're old, but they just don't understand, like, even basic technology sometimes, like how even a website works or how ad revenue works sometimes. And they're the ones that would be changing these policies or enforcing these policies. And what do we do in that state? It's like, oh, you change the culture, oh, you got to speak together. And it's like, kind of the reality is humans can usually just suck at talking to each other. So, like, or they just don't want to listen, or how do we actually fight against bad actors just adopting these technologies when they're still a Wild West and just doing whatever they want with them?
On a personal level, I really believe for the greater good that we are not blind. Again, the bad actors or whomever have grabbed onto this and they're exploiting it, and that's their day to day. We're going to talk about our organizations, our CEOs, I think there's an awareness. We can see it in the news. I mean, I don't think we're completely. I think that, as Andrew was saying, as policy is going to come forth, as we know that we just can't come out and say, okay, this is the policy. We're not going to have crypto at all. Then that's just going to throw this into chaos. And so we're going to have crypto. So that chaotic part that's happening in our time, evolution of it. So I think as we see that as at that part, because again, I can't speak to definite policies or definite things that are happening, but I'm pretty sure our government is not blind. I would definitely believe that because, like I said, I've seen the evolution being as far as with things as different equations, different things that have evolved, and we know there's a threat. That we now just say this plane or this drone is out there and it's in the air, that nobody else out there has that technology to bring. And so there's going to be also those different vulnerabilities that we're talking. And I like this convergent security because this is where it starts. We have the geopolitical person here that can bring that scope, and the person that can bring from the IT, and the person that can bring from the crypto and all this stuff. And definitely is evolution. It's not there yet, but I'm pretty sure I want to believe that the discussions are going on.
It's like, do you think we are setting new policy and actually seeing these attacks fast enough and reacting fast enough to them yet?
When I think there's an appetite, no, when I think there's an appetite that the return that's on it right now, no. It's just, again, I went to computer science school to learn computer science and how to program. I always make the joke there's probably a 5-year-old right now that's going through programming that's learning it. So a bigger footprint right now. They're introduced comes opportunity of value. So of course, what's going to suck to it? Everybody that's to be, rewarded from that, from a government to an individual organization. So we probably, I want to say we're far behind, but I want to believe that we're aware.
Oh, I was actually just kind of, putting the pieces together with the microphone. But yeah, yes, I do. With your comment, I almost heard some frustration in your voice, which is justified. Like, you're not seeing the changes, and why aren't people aware, and why aren't people seeing this? And that's completely legitimate. One thing I will say as a note of hope is that life is a transition, right? Well, what's here today will be gone tomorrow. Life will keep moving on. And you're the wheel of that. You're the wheel. When you're entering into the field, you're the wheel that will keep that moving forward. And you have the good intention. The other thing I want to mention too is when you think about technologies, and when hackers are right on top of it the moment it's released, put your hacker hat on for a minute and think, what if the hackers are actually inventing some of these technologies? Now, I'm not saying crypto, but I'm saying other things that are coming in the future. Because when we look at threat actor classes, they're state-sponsored threat actors, which probably have an unlimited amount of money, right? They can come up with ideas. They have their own think tanks, just like we have think tanks on the good side, right? We can think of solutions. The bad actors have think tanks too. It's not just thugs in a room somewhere, in a small bar in a dark alley. They're extremely sophisticated people, and they can come up with very, very good ideas that can be put out there as a potential new technology just to lure people in. So I would say put your hacker hat on and kind of reverse that whole scenario.
So recently we were learning how to set up security protocols, how network function, and how devices work. So my question is, how do you deal with an actor or threat actor who has equal knowledge to know what to do and how to attack you?
That's an excellent. Anyone want to go? I can tackle it if not. So that's a good question. So I would almost say you say they have equal knowledge to what I have. I would say be careful with that thought, because that's an assumption, right? And as soon as you make the assumption that the threat actor has the exact same level of knowledge that you have, you're almost ready to make a decision based on that. I would say almost approach that if you think that way. I kind of think of it like as maybe in a video game like Red Dead Redemption or something like that, or whatever you might be playing, is like if your opponent seems to always counter every move that you make. And it seems, they could be setting you up too, right? They could be testing your level of knowledge. They could be way ahead of you and just seeing eventually where you fatigue, right? They could be waiting for the vulnerability. So I would say challenge that assumption if that's something that you have, and don't be very careful in cybersecurity of something called confirmation bias. So like if you have something that says, this is what I think, then every piece of information will go to reinforce that, turn it around and say, try to challenge it, because maybe they're less skilled. Maybe they're just testing your level of skill. So I would say take that as an assumption. Make sense?
Can I add to that again? Like, this is that whole team player thing too, right? It's kind of like in my class, when you cable up your network, you want to have someone else look at it, right? So I think, you know, if that is the case, you want to work together with a team and have a team partnering with you, because then you have more eyes on it, you have more experience on it, and I think that starts to clear up some of that, right? But I think it's hard to know. It's hard to know what's happening out there laterally, moving through our networks, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an important point, Andrea, you know, avoid echo chambers and don't work in a vacuum. You know, the more good inputs that, you know, just like a community, right? We're talking about converged security, converged thinking, right? Because you're not going to be alone in cybersecurity. It's going to be a rare situation where you're alone and you're the only decision point. There's usually multiple people supporting you. So yeah, that's a great follow.
And I think all of us could probably talk to, you know, sometimes when something goes wrong, you're gonna have like some sort of a resolution, you know, call or a resolution meeting, conflict resolution, whatever the situation, where you're gonna bring together a bunch of players in, you know, that within your company or within the government or within other companies that are partnering with you, and you're gonna be sitting on a call or sitting in a room and hashing out, okay, like how, like the whole the vessel thing, right? Okay, was this a mechanical problem? Was it a plumbing problem? Was it an IT problem? Was the water low, right? So you're just gonna have this group of people that are hammering out a situation, and then, you know, each one of you may take on a task, and then you're gonna come back in 8 hours and you're gonna hash it out again, right? And so that is a common thing, so that you're not really ideally ever gonna be on your own with that type of a problem.
I would like to speak to the topics that we've discussed as a whole, with the question of what if the hacker has the same knowledge as you do. That is why we're trying to implement the converged security, because as we learn about how hackers operate and the attacks they do, we then have the information of the symptoms that come from that, which then leads to security to patch or implement safeguards to prevent those activities. But at the same time, if we didn't have threat actors, we all wouldn't have jobs. The fact that there are other people out there with this malicious intent is the need for security, and that's why cybersecurity is becoming such a thriving business, is because there's all these issues that are now arising and causing problems to more day-to-day life activities.
I think that's a good point. Although I would say, if there weren't threat actors out there and we didn't have to focus all of our energy and time on protecting our networks and protecting our infrastructure, we would be able to focus our time on a lot of other very valuable things. So it would be a beautiful world.
I guess you kind of answered it, but it's like you depend probably you do like more on safeguards and defenses that are already and systems that are already in place, but like try to just, you know, already prevent an attack. But is it, if you're starting to become more reactionary against an attack, is it already kind of too late? Are you in deep water, or how do you like recover from that? Like get your footing and then I guess fight against it.
That's a great question.
So, as we know, security is there, and you brought out the comment of that. You know, we've got different devices and mechanisms in place. What I have come to understand and want to communicate is that I think vendors and organizations are not just sitting back and saying, okay, what we've got, you know, firewalls. We're going to next generation firewalls. We're going to different type of IDSs and intrusion detection systems. But one thing that's also out there now, we got AI. AI is becoming a big part now, playing in that system too. So I don't want to say that we're just kind of sitting with the confidence that what worked in the past is always going to work in the future. I don't think any business or any government or any organization, geopolitical, are sitting back right now, because I don't think we would be having this conversation, because we're concerned that there are bad actors out there. We know they have the competence, or they're at least there's the information out there to become competent and capable on both sides. So I want to say that there's an evolution in the way that the border security is being laid out. I want to believe and understand that we're coming up with the technology and using it in the different vendors and those components. So I don't think we're in a position where the threat actors got a hand up on it. Like I repeat before, I think it's an opportunity, and it may seem like there's a large group or mass that's moved to it. I think there's also a response that on the other side, we understand that and are now responding to it and not just saying, okay, well, what worked today is going to work tomorrow. When you're sitting there and you're an organization, and if you don't get to that point where you're at that level, you're going to work with the basic components and different things. There are going to be different procedures there. There's going to be policies of how you upgrade that system. You, on a personal level, are going to have the responsibility. Are you going to do it by the book, or are you going to let it go? Are you going to say, this is what I'm supposed to do because I'm supposed to do port security on this ticket, and I know this person, they didn't put a ticket in, I didn't validate what they were saying. So I think the point I'm alluding to is when we, as in the security business, start to sit back and not be, aggressive, progressive, always aware, never think there's an opportunity that won't be exposed because it's just day to day. I think that's where it becomes like we're day to day, we're using the same thing. So progressiveness in our thinking, all the things that I do, I think, okay, even when I feel like, I can just do it, it's like, no, I'm going to make sure I follow those procedures and protocols that I know.
Wanted to raise an interesting topic in relation to what topics discussed previously. I think it's very important, as Andrea previously mentioned, regulations, and once more regulations. And here we need to work with law enforcement, And one of the another challenging topics is that how do we prevent talented workforce like you from being recruited by malicious actors? That is one of the challenges because the malicious actors, they're not learning by themselves. They have resources to recruit talent. How do we make sure as governments, now I'm particularly not advocating for any particular government because I'm gracefully invited to the United States, which thank you for that. But I'm just saying like in general, and from my side, I am pushing for those things. Yeah, I'm actively working on this because I understand the dangers we are facing today. I am for us, folks, fighting. Yeah, so it's very important. It's very important to make sure that talented workforce is not recruited. Serious mechanisms need to be in place. That they are not incentivized, not attracted by any propositions from the malicious actors.
That's a great. I mean, that's just such a great point. And it's really a cyber point, right? Is because there are criminal organizations that will attempt to recruit the best and the brightest, and they will incentivize you financially. They will incentivize you, perhaps through threats. Like, not saying it's going to happen to anyone in this room. It probably will never happen. It's a very small, percentage of people it happens with, but it could happen. And so when you think about that, and you think about, could that happen? Could you potentially be approached by a bad actor, a threat actor organization? It's possible, but it's conversations like this that help you prepare. Because I think it was Sun Tzu who said in the book The Art of War, who's more dangerous, the adversary who's prepared, or the adversary who goes against, and it's the adversaries who's prepared, and you have to prepare with knowledge, and that's what you're getting here. You're getting a lot of great insights too.
Okay, I wanted to answer one question. I think you had asked about what we could do, right? Like what we can do about some of the stuff that's going on. So I just want to say, learn. Like you're all here in college, and that is like a really good starting point, right? Just keep learning, right? And then keep learning, because the more you learn, different doors and different ideas will open up to you that will begin to reveal themselves of what you might want to do specifically to help these things, right, that are going on. I don't know, is it getting involved with writing standards and procedures? Is it, running for office? Is it moving higher up the ladder in IT, right? So learn. You really just need to keep learning. And if you're going to be in this field, I joke all the time. Well, I don't know if I joke all the time, but some of you might have heard me. I should have become a math professor. Why? Because the algebraic equation hasn't changed in, I don't know, hundreds of years. But IT changes. So, I would just want to say keep learning. And so I'm going to end with this, asking each of you a question. So if you were making a recommendation to students that are in the IT field right now, or considering going into the IT field, because we kind of have a mix, right? Like, I think some of you are a little entry level, some of you already have an idea. Like what are you learning? What are you excited about learning? What do you see as your next step that that you're thinking about wanting to do more of or understand differently? So I'm going to leave it with that, and then we'll open it up for questions.
AI is the platform that I'm kind of to expand my knowledge on, not just from using it, but as been talked here, make sure it is accurate in what I use. So definitely I'm learning that, learning the different engines that drive it. I want to know differently how it affects what I do. I've seen some efficiency that it brings, but I want to learn more about it and definitely become to how that and incorporate in an organization. We know, as we talked here tonight, that how it can be misused and different things that it can drive to. But that's my next exciting thing I want to do. Just not just kind of staying in the nuts and bolts of just kind of what I do in the security, and definitely also incorporate that with AI. So if I want to say something that I've kind of learned and want to use, I want to learn how AI is used, use that information effectively to build security in the things that I do at my job.
That's great, and I'll second that as well. AI is fun. I've worked with it professionally. I've used it personally. I like to play guitar. I'm a musician, and so I use it to try to create music because I think it's cool. I try to understand a little bit more of the math behind the music, because music is mathematical. So personally, it's something I've taken courses on, and I just try to stay fresh with and understand from the cyber side of it, how is it being used, how is it being misused, what's the actual use case for it. So I would probably say AI as well. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, what would we be doing if we didn't have all these cyber threats? Well, there's a lot of things you could be doing, right? You could be farming, right? So there's a lot of knowledge that can be gained from it. So I think that's kind of one of the coolest frontiers out there, because it's not going to go anywhere. How fast it's going to scale from here is anybody's guess. There are constraints on that. It requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of computing power. You're not going to be able to scale to the next level until you go nuclear, or who knows. We've kind of talked about it in class a little bit just for fun. But yeah, definitely AI.
Yeah, I think probably AI as well, although despite the common perhaps knowledge that people in security and intelligence perhaps not so artistry, but for me, for example, it's interesting to create drawings with AI, with the help of AI, What else? In terms of security, I'm monitoring and interested in also in topics how the IT security, how it is interconnected with deep sea cables, with the potential hacking from Russia's side. What are the potential dangers, and to what extent this attacks is gonna escalate? What is the potential election interference? And I'm not talking perhaps domestically, locally, we're talking globally. The use of the social media as well, that is an interesting topic. How it psychologically affects our opinion, how it creates division and aggression among populations. Yeah, that's probably and as well some deep sea cables also connected to some potential hacking activity and cyber attacks from Russia's side on the territory of the European Union. particularly I'm looking at Ireland right now, which is partially seems like a hub for such activities recently. So that's are the topics I'm learning and interested in, and I think I need also. I'm so excited to be, by the way, on the panel, and thank you so much for having me here. And I also understand that I have a long way to go and a lot to learn. And I think I will be after tonight. I will be even more strengthening my IT component. Thank you.
That's a great question, Miguel. And one other thing I'll say with AI is always just understand there's AS to awesome student. So I always like try to say AI always inferior, awesome student always superior.
Thank you.
So you're always going to be superior to AI. Just believe that. But just repeat that question because I just forgot. So. Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So I try to learn from peers. I try to learn from industry publications, going to government websites, news feeds, just anywhere I can get it. I'm pretty open myself. I just have my go-to sources to say this is what I'm going to go to. This is what I'm going to learn about. So I don't restrict myself to any resource. I kind of just try to see it just about everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here as well, monitoring social media and, what are different groups of people are talking about, what's their opinions. Knowing a couple of languages also helps sometimes, to conduct comparative analysis, who's talking what and where. Even if we spoke about that social media is definitely in some ways malicious, it's important as well to survey the opinions of people and what's in hearts and minds. On social media, I wouldn't rely for news, definitely. Publications, think tank publications in your field, if you'd like in the political field, like organizations like Grant Corporation, Royal United Services Institute in London, Atlantic Council, and etc. Yeah, and news. Yeah, news in your field. Just mix and match, compare, validate the information if it's reliable source or not, and analyze. Yes, analytics.
I'll just stop here and say thank you, everybody, and I'll hand it off.
Again, I am not set on just one specific, but I probably read a lot of more government information just because of background, just to kind of, they were talking about their different, things that are coming out, the different organizations that are there. But as the team here says, it's like the more you expand, or you should expand across political, globally, you're going to get an understanding because, again, I think when we were talking about are we behind, I think that is what kind of gives me the idea and the confidence that we're not. Where there are going to be bad actors. We know that that's in any organization or any type of thing. But globally, I think you need to expand. And I think as you see that the innovation that's out there, reading what's new, what's coming up in the technologies for AI or what's coming in, and especially the area that you're working in, when we have these convergence and the aspirations that's going to come forth in the future, this is where those talks are going to come from, because you're well-rounded. You're not just, okay, I'm just in my silo, I'm learning my business, and you could escalate and go that way. But again, we know that all these entities are touching. We're global. We can say our company is, making it here in America, but you're going to be in some type of exchange, whether it's going to Bitcoin or just regular currency or in the stock market or those things. So well-round yourself in all those things. Even in the stock market, they got different publications and different things they talk about, the attacks and different things that they deal with. So well-roundedness is definitely in any area you can pick.
Any other questions? Yeah, our library has a lot of resources, and they're very good at helping you find what you need if you're looking to learn about something specific. They're really, really good. It's their specialty.
Printed material, although perhaps you might some of you consider archaic and old-fashioned. It didn't go out of fashion. Just keep it in mind, you know. It's very useful, and even if some books from years ago can give you pretty brilliant ideas at times. So don't disregard those.
There's like OpenAI and just tons of different LLMs. Have we been creating our own? So just as like a precaution to like flood attacks of garbage information into these LLMs, and that it may spit out like stuff we don't want it to, or things we ask it, like you were saying, inputs and outputs. Are we like trying to develop our own?
Specifically on the government side, I don't know directly, but as I say, when I left out of the military, there was when I initially joined, there was no cybersecurity organization. There is, so I use that as my confidence to say that yes, I'm sure, and the confidence of that. It could be used against warfare against us as our nation state. So if we just sat back and kind of said, no, that wouldn't be there, I doubt it. I mean, the powers to be, so to speak, are definitely looking at that because it's a vulnerability. Just like in any business, you're going to want to know what your vulnerability, what's your risk, and that is one. The innovation and how it's being, moved across the spectrum there, definitely, because we have too many things that are electronically driven right now to think that we can't protect, or we should not protect them. So I want to say yes.
And kind of piggybacking off this, sorry to keep
That's
asking,
okay.
but how, I guess even as like a general population, and it kind of relates to cybersecurity in a way of, I mean, all these companies are secretly, not secretly, sometimes they make statements about it, but it's like scraping your data or anything you say or post online, and then even feeding those into those LLMs for their own gain. How do we even stop that, or like?
Policy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say something. Okay, my little soapbox, and I don't know how this will happen, but we need to advocate to own our own data. If I buy something at Target, I own the fact that I bought it at Target. If I fill out something on YouTube or whatever, I want to own it. And if a company wants to advertise to me, then they can pay me for my data. Now, is that ever possible? I don't know. Like, how would we undo what has been done? But not only would that provide me ownership over my own data, it would provide me a monetary stream of money that I could earn when AI takes over 50% of the jobs or whatever it's going to take over. Right? So these are some of the things that you might want to be thinking about is how can you own your data? Right? I mean, like, what my glasses prescription is out there, right? What size I wear is out there, along with all of the other things that are probably more private. So I really want you all thinking about how can you own your own data? How do we move to that, where you own your data, not, a company, not a large data analytic company, so.
That's a very good point. I like the way you put that out there. It's like, yeah, our data's out there. It's ours. And now it becomes like, we don't own it anymore and they have it and it's going to go on. But definitely, as you can move to think out how to own your own data, and back to your point is in the government, or how is that going to be stopped or whatever else, I guess as, Andrew was saying, is like we have to learn how to take on our own data. Not there yet. We figured it out. But at some point, I think it's going to be probably moved or legislated that it can be done that way, in my opinion. I don't have any.
Is moving that
Yes.
direction.
Yeah, because I was
Yeah.
just about to say,
Yeah.
because like in your, well, not really Department of Homeland Security, but like
Right.
DOC in general is like, how do these companies, I mean, do they see it as a cyber? I not really a cyber threat, but like they have data centers everywhere, and how do you compartmentalize like, oh, this is an EU or, you know, or UK person's data, but a US person that doesn't have to follow those same laws on the same exact server.
Right.
How,
I think it's just at a point where, as we're talking about, it just hasn't been legislated yet to get to that point. Enough voices haven't kind of pushed back to say that we need to do that. We know the harm that it does. We know that what's the cost or the availability of who's using it. We know that. We see that in the news and publicized. But it hasn't struck a vein enough, in my opinion, to say we need to give the owner back their ownership of their data.
I think it's a great, interesting question, and some of the things that you said earlier is, you see people in government, and maybe some people have been there a long time, and they're like the furniture, and why aren't things changing? Well, if you're into crypto, if you're into stocks and all that stuff, you have to ask, why hasn't insider trading changed? Why haven't all these laws changed? The reason why, in my opinion, that they haven't changed is there's a financial incentive. There's financial gain. And right, there's lobbying. So you want to own your own data. It has to be incentivized somehow. And I don't have the answer to what that incentive would be, but that's what it has to be. Policymakers, lawmakers, they have to be incentivized somehow. There has to be a benefit. And maybe some of you in this room, maybe one of you will be, the president. Maybe one of you will be a congressperson. I don't know what your paths are going to be other than awesome. I truly, truly think that. But at the same time, like, go change the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. And sometimes you have to advocate for that. Just like what we're doing here. We're kind of talking about it, putting the ideas out there to say, all right, this is how it's going to change. So, maybe just determined to be that change and figure out, because it's not, I don't think any one person can come up with that solution. It's going to be tough.
As Andrea said, I absolutely agree. Advocacy at each of your personal level, advocacy. Standing up for your rights, standing, for how do you feel? Do you want to share this information? Don't give access to the information. One of the things I would definitely highly not recommend, I know a lot of people are excited about knowing their heritage, submitting their DNA data. Please do not do that. Because certain states in the world, certain actors, they actually collect the DNA data, and it's unknown for sure what are potential, the purposes of collection, and what are potential risks we are facing in the further years. Yeah, thank you.
So my question is,
That's a great question. So, security awareness training, right? Most companies, most government entities, I would imagine, have a security awareness training to say these are the things, a baseline to be aware of. And usually there's a test that's done. Probably, maybe it's biannual, maybe it's quarterly, just to say this is what everyone needs to be aware of. Just like, hey, if there's a USB device laying in the parking lot, don't pick it up. If someone comes around and says, hey, here's a cool free phone charger, well, it could be an OMG cable, and if you're not familiar with that, it's a cable that contains an operating system and does all kinds of horrible stuff, even though it looks like a regular charging cable, right? So it's all about education. So if your question is just about awareness, if it's about actual access, then actual access to sensitive data would be need to know. Right, and you see, principle of least privilege. What do I need to know to do my job, right? And that's really all anyone needs to know. And you find that changes as, especially like in corporate America, as you climb the ladder, so to speak, suddenly it's literally as you step up each rung, you start seeing a bigger piece of the landscape, and you're able to see further over the hills because you have a need for that data. But from a day-to-day perspective, it's all about education, training, awareness, conversation, and testing. You have to test, because if you don't test, you can take any population just like this room, and we can educate you on something, but if we don't test you, we have no methodology to understand how much, of the material that you actually absorbed. And so it's the same way in any employee environment, just like with sales. Make sense? Cool.
Earlier we were talking about cryptocurrency and how cryptocurrencies can use the platforms weapons. So I'm just wondering, what sort of policies can we expect to address in the future?
Not being cryptocurrency experts.
Yes.
That'd be-
So the question is, what policies can we,
Yeah,
can we,
what
Policies
policies
maybe.
can be,
Should we be, like, even at our level, like, what policies should we be thinking about to start to move forward, just as a community, an IT community?
to prevent cryptocurrency from being used for,
misuse.
Yeah,
You know,
being misused.
that
Tracking.
it's tough, right? And I think that's a great question. And just like with what I think it was this month where you had to go in and validate your exchange accounts and just go through the final steps of personal and identifiable information to say this is me, this is my address on the blockchain. I don't know if anyone wants more regulation in the world or more laws, right? Because it's a lot easier to make laws than it is to get rid of laws. And some laws are pretty archaic, which is why you see things that, maybe that's good in some situations, but it can also be a hold back, the world from progress. So that's a tough question. It's like, how do you stop, how do you change it? And I think it's observation. Maybe the best answer is just to observe what it's being used for. If you're going to implement policy, go with existing. That's the easy first baseline. What's illegal with coin, with cash, with your debit card is also illegal with crypto. So that's already existing. If
You
you
can't steal it, you can't launder it, I mean, you can, but it's illegal to
and,
do
it, and it's a little harder to prove, like with the
Right.
NFTs. Like if I have $5 million in Doge and I'm willing to pay you $1 million for an NFT of a digital monkey, who's to say that that's not actually worth it to me? That's personal valuation, right? So there's a lot of more or less implied value in things. And when it gets into crypto and it gets into the different forms that could be used for illicit purposes, you get into that. I think that's why things went the art direction with the NFTs. Now, I'm not against NFTs. I think they're kind of cool. But at the same time, there's always going to be a way to circumvent, and that's what the bad actors do.
Well, our students, you know what we're talking about. There's always ways to circumvent. And everyone,
That wasn't a hint or anything.
everything in the syllabus is because of that.
When it comes to mitigating the illegal exchange of cryptocurrency, I believe there has to be centralized. It has to become more centralized because for all the vectors of cryptocurrency, there's so many attack points that if Bitcoin has all these policies, it can just go to Doge. Doge has all these policies, it just goes to the next. Because if it becomes centralized, then there's one place to apply these changes in policies. Also, for the modern policies we have for cash and our debit cards and the digital currency we have already is based off of a centralized government that's controlling it. So I believe if we add that sense of similarity between the two, we can then add our rules that would have for our money out to cryptocurrency.
I think that's a great insight, almost like the World Health Organization or the World Banking Organization. have something that's centralized, yeah, and that makes sense, right, because like cryptocurrency has no borders, so I think that's super smart. That's
It-
super smart.
It is, that's completely legit. You got something,
Make
Xavier?
it happen, man.
I was curious about your guys' insight on Web3. You know, earlier we were mentioning how it's like a technology. We didn't mention Web3 exactly, but we were mentioning like how people could control their own data. Web3 is like a technology for that. So I just kind of wanted to hear your guys' insight, or if like there's any kind of like integration going on in your industries right now.
Okay, I'm just gonna repeat the question, so it's about web, you know, what are we seeing around Web three and integration maybe into what you're doing, and I know nothing about this, so
I
can't speak to it. You stumped us.
Oh, no.
You stumped us.
It's like technology where people control their own data through the blockchain. Like
Mm.
all kinds of data, Facebook data, Instagram data.
Well, and if I mean, Web three, it's the guy that originally created the internet that's behind that, right?
I don't think it's him behind it. It's like a like multiple developers
A consortium?
yeah, it's like a new internet almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was,
Yeah,
thought it alluded to.
Yeah, it's interesting, and to what you were saying, Kyle, is like centralization. Like maybe everyone's cryptocurrency address gets tied to their social security numbers, like your bank account. That's a form of centralization, right?
yeah.
But it also defeats the privacy behind the decentralization, right? So there's that. Did you have something to go?
And that's just like a comment. Yeah, yeah, I think we could do that. I think again, we're just a long way from that because the technology is outpacing our thought processes on all the stuff that's happening.
So I don't know how knowledgeable you are about. I want to talk about the personal information again, and I noticed for a lot of company websites, there's always the option for California only, where you can request to not for that company to not keep your data. So why would that only be applied to California, and why wouldn't that be more mainstream or globalized?
That's a great question. You're talking about the California Consumer Protection Act.
I didn't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've actually done a little bit of work with that, just like with GDPR. And really, I'm not a lawmaker or a legislator, but I think it's up to the individual states to decide to do that for their citizens. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to. But
Not that it couldn't be nationally.
it could be
right,
national.
at some point.
you know, it's like the German right to be forgotten, right? In Germany, there's a right to be forgotten. So, either one of you want to share any insights on that?
So the question is why is it globally or why is it going again? I think Andrew brought up a very good point. It's like I think it's kind of our legislation or differences or how we're going to come to something like we were talking about decentralization with crypto. I don't know, in my opinion, if as a culture we're ready to kind of or our legislatures are ready to say we need to pull this back and give it back to the individuals. I think it does need to be done, in my opinion, but it's like we've been in this spiral so long or this process so long. It's like it's monetized. It's like this. Yeah. It's like you're talking about taking something that's become very valuable to organizations that profit from it. Not that it doesn't need to be explored or done, but it's going to take time. And I think we're seeing the movement of it right now with what you're talking about and different things like that. Also, when he was talking about Web3 back there, I think we're now seeing that there needs to be change. It's small right now. Is it going to catch up with the pace of things that are right now? I think it will, but it'll just take time. And I think, like we keep saying here tonight, is like these conversations are the innovation and the ideas that we talked about that are going to be when you're in these companies and you make it to those points and your voice, is going to be the discussion. Because right now, the common thing is leave it as is. And we'll talk about it. We'll hear both sides complain about it, why it should or should not be. But at times, just like anything it does in our world, our society, it's going to evolve where it's going to make that change and generational change that we're talking about, in the political system and globally.
I mean, in reality, how many of you think about it on any given day that how much of your data you're giving away? I think we just come numb to it, like, oh, they already know everything about me. What does it matter? I'm going to Google one more thing, right? I mean, do any of you really care that they're getting everything? You know?
But I don't know how to get it back.
Right. I mean, I
Right.
care too, but I'm like, well, they already know this about me. So I mean, and again, it's this type of, I'm not even gonna call it ambivalence. Really, I don't know that it's ambivalence, but. I have no idea.
It's a tough question, right? And so in cybersecurity, there's a point where we say there's risk acceptance.
Right.
Right, well, I have to accept this risk, and that's what it's going to be. So, there are acts in place like the Digital Millennial Copyright Act to say, hey, if you end up stealing one of my copyrighted images, I have recourse, right? But at the same time, with getting your information, because number one, if we go back and ask a question before that, is you don't even know all the places your information is or whose hands it's in. It could be in every country, everybody's hands. We don't know. And for me, I can only speak for myself personally. I just say, okay, that's risk acceptance. It's out there in the wild, and it's really. I wish I had the answer, right? I wish there was a button and we just click reset and then wipe out the last 50 years of technology, but it's not possible. And so going forward, it's, where do we move? Anytime you are talking about a change like this, you're almost like taking a population and you're saying there's going to be a legacy group that it's already out there. Then going forward, there's going to be a new group, a version 2, where it's not out there. And so eventually, over time, obviously the people in the version 1 group would not be alive. Then you would just have the version 2 group going forward. But how that is or how it ever gets done, I have no idea. Anyone want to add anything?
I'd like to add something, just a comment onto owning our own data. At least logically to me, the only place where that change can occur is with people's information that's out there to actually take ownership of it in the sense of finding a sense like a unity in a group to then push for this policy or act or whatever it's going to look like to take place, because it's not going to happen from the people that's taking it because they profit off of it. So why would they give away that sense of, or that source of income, like they're profiting off of it legally? So finding a group or creating a group with the goal of owning our own data will have to come from the people's data that's being taken.
Can you pass that behind you?
Just to add to what Professor Rob was saying and answer my question, I know that there are companies formed around just for that, just collecting data, and then they'll be giving that data for data brokers. Again, as Professor Rod said, there's no guarantee that all of it's going to be deleted because you never know whose hand that data is. But
That's
Very
tough.
coincidental leaks.
Yeah.
It's just going to turn into mitigation.
All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up, right? And then we can stay and keep answering questions if you have more questions. So can everybody please just thank you so much, because I think this was like a really good conversation. And I feel like maybe we need to get a crypto person in here. Do I need to ask for a crypto, try to find a crypto person, right? That seems to be really.
We have plenty of them.
Yeah, do we? I don't know anybody that knows about crypto, do you?
I have some great students that are quite well versed.
Oh, okay, we'll have them as the guest speaker.
There we go.
Okay, all right, well, thank you, and thank you so much for coming, I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
So we'll stay and answer, can you stay and answer questions if
Sure.
people have questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh?
How was the walk into Westmay?
Oh, yeah, we
Presentation.
we were going to do it this week, but we're off the next week again.
Ah.
See how that works. So we're getting there.
I saw pictures of the rotations going around on their Instagram. And it looked like they had a good time.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet it was a lot of fun. I would have liked to have gone, but
I'll take that
There we
from
go.
you. Thank
But,
you.